Welcome again to another exciting episode of the Agile Masters podcast. And today we're diving deep into the challenges and misconceptions surrounding the role of a Scrum Master and how you measure value in Agile. Our guest today is Mike Lloyd, the creator of the Dysfunction mapping framework. So we're going to discuss along with Mike the dysfunction mapping, and how you can use it to actually deliver value to your teams and your organizations. We're going to look at the decline in the quality of Agile practitioners. We're going to look at the importance of alignment with an organization's definition of value. And we'll also explore the importance of adaptation, of discipline, and continuous learning, right? So whether you are a seasoned practitioner or just getting started, be you an Agile coach, a Scrum Master, a delivery lead, a product owner, a team member, a CTO, a CEO, this episode is packed with something that you will not want to miss. And before we get started, don't forget to subscribe to the podcast and also to share this with your friends and colleagues so we can all learn together. So before we go any further, don't forget to grab your pen, grab your pencil, grab your paper, grab your notebook, grab your iPad. Let's learn together and let's jump right in. So welcome again to the Agile Masters podcast with Temi. Welcome to today's podcast, Mike. Thank you for joining us today. So can you introduce yourself to, it's an honor, really. I've watched your YouTube videos, read some of your text on LinkedIn. Mike he knows what he's talking about. He's really passionate about this. And that's why, the Agile Matrix podcast talk about bringing people that know this stuff, are passionate about it, and want to actually help the industry get better. So I'm really pleased to have Mike here. So Mike, could you introduce yourself to our listeners today?
Yeah, cool. Thank you. So I guess first I just want to quickly jump on the I really know what I'm talking about statement, because I'm not sure how true that is. I guess anyone who follows me on LinkedIn will know that I certainly have no problem with confidently stating what I think is true. Whether that's right is something maybe other people will have to decide. But yeah, in terms of who I am, I'm a Agile coach and a Scrum Master. I have been kind of working in this world for nearly 9 years now. Like most people, I feel like I started as a Scrum Master before I was really ready. I didn't really understand the role and I wasn't very good at it. And one of the things I really focused on is how do I get better at really helping teams solve problems and to really demonstrate and measure that improvement so that, basically just to get rid of my own imposter syndrome, right? So I can say, here's how I know that I'm doing a good job. After a while of kind of doing that, I realized that my approach was starting to become quite repeatable. I would join a new team, I would go through these steps, and I would end up having a really, really big positive impact. And when I started particularly talking on LinkedIn, and this was really during COVID times that, because I no longer had a team to talk to, I started spending more time online. I realized that there were a lot of people that were going through the same pattern that I had gone through. They were still struggling. They still weren't demonstrating their value. And no one was really focusing on that element of how do I, teach Scrum Masters to actually be better at doing that job, Agile coaches to be better at doing that job, rather than just teaching them how to, learn a new framework or whatever it is. So yeah, I decided that I would kind of take my approach and standardize it, give it, a series of steps and a name. And that became dysfunction mapping, which is the thing that now I spend quite a lot of my time talking about. Really, it's just my attempt to kind of teach people something that is concrete, that helps them solve problems, that makes it easier to demonstrate and measure your value, and hopefully just makes the Agile community a little bit better and more sellable, I guess, to make ourselves more sellable in the industry.
That's fantastic. That's really good. I think the thing I like about what you said, and I think it's general to most Agilists that I've spoken with, there is a path of discovery, and then awareness. You become aware of, okay, actually, this thing I'm doing is kind of like working. Let's share it with the world. Hey, this is what I've tried. See if you can do it as well. See if you can do anything with it. And that's how the industry grows, because we all contribute to it, and that's really fantastic. So thank you very much for that. As a fellow member of the industry, like I said, I've watched your YouTube videos and I liked the idea of dysfunction mapping, but we'll jump into that. But I'm looking at my question. So yes, question number 2. So like you said, you've been in Agile space for 9 years there, but how did you walk into it?
Yeah, so it started with so I didn't go to university. I didn't really know when I was younger what I wanted to do, but I'm a massive nerd. I love, I build computers. I've been building computers since I was a very young teenager. So I knew I wanted to be in tech. And my very first job was essentially in a call center for a kind of tech support, have you tried turning it off and on again kind of thing. That was
Yeah,
my
yeah.
first step into technology.
Okay.
And it was during that time that I started to kind of slowly get a handle on how software development worked, because I would talk to the different teams that were building the products. It was at a bank that I was doing this. And so, you talk to them about the problems that you're seeing and what users are complaining about and see if you can get them fixed. And one thing that I noticed was there was this one team that was building stuff inside the bank. And again, this was about 10 years ago now. So this was sort of, Agile was less common, let's say, than it was today,
Yeah.
than it is today. And I would go to this one team and I would say, hey, we've got this problem, users have been complaining that this button's broken, can we fix it? And that one team would be like, yeah, cool. We'll get it done. We'll get some tested, come back in a couple of weeks and we'll see if it's resolved the issue. Okay, awesome. And then there's this other team that I would go to and I would say, people are complaining about this issue is really, really important. It's causing loads of problems, right? We're costing, spending loads of money trying to do workarounds. And the team would say, well, it's a problem, but we've got all these other problems on the backlog, and we only do a release twice a year, and it costs us like $1 million to do a release, so probably this isn't gonna get fixed. And so, yeah, when I kind of realized there's two very, very different things happening here, like why is that? And I discovered obviously the reason that other team was doing a better job was they were a Scrum team. I decided that's what I wanted to learn and do. It's like, how do I stop people from ever having to work in that other way? So yeah, I worked on my business analysis skills, used that as a way to get into a Scrum team as an analyst, spent about a year doing that, and then got my first chance to kind of be a Scrum Master, and then kind of that was it from there. It was just kind of trying to find ways to practice those skills and eventually help people get better at this Agile thing.
Wow. And how has it been so far? What would you say? So in the 9, 10 years, how has it been? What has the highlights been?
So I think the thing that was interesting was that early on, I kind of joined the Agile movement at, I think, a really interesting time, right, where we had gotten past the early adopters phase, but we were only just into the kind of mass market. Most teams are going Agile by default, and so there were a lot of teams that really wanted help and had not yet been scarred by poor Agile transformations and that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
So it was a lot more enjoyable, I found, back then, because there was a lot less resistance. And so I helped a lot of teams do a lot of really non-frameworky stuff as well. It was very much just like pragmatic guidance. How do we get better at delivering incrementally and closing our feedback loops and all that kind of stuff? And what I found is that over the last kind of 4 years or so, more and more I'm going into teams and they're very skeptical of this Agile thing. Usually because they've had some really ineffective, command and control change person that's come in and tried to tell them how to do their jobs. And so now you have to do a lot more relationship building to actually get to the point of creating successful change, which is, that's informed part of what dysfunction mapping is all about. But I think in particular in the last couple of years, like certainly since COVID, there's been such a drastic shift in the perception of Agile practitioners and what we do that it's really required a rethink of how you even talk about this stuff. And so watching that journey, it feels like it's just a regression and it's gotten harder and harder. So it would be very easy to get quite cynical about it. I think that we're at that pendulum point where it's going to start swinging back in the other direction soon, I hope. But that's a theory that remains to be tested. So.
No, I think you're very correct, because I remember also 2016. It was, I mean, as a contract Scrum Master, you're getting calls like every other day. They're asking you to come solve their problems, and they're very open. I remember a role I had in 2016, and they basically just sat me down and said it was almost like help. And they listed out all their problems and all that. Yeah, we got into there, started work, and after a year, we turned things around. I left, got another role. It was almost a year. We're well received. I remember an insurance company I worked in. We actually had a whole floor with, special painted walls that we could put Post-it, could write on. It was a big thing. And I heard about that company now. They've rolled back their Agile practice big time now.
Yeah, and that's a story that seems to be coming up more and more lately, right? Which is again where you can get a bit cynical about things. It's interesting when you mention that because it's another thing that's just kind of popped into my mind is that 10 years ago, 9 years ago, whatever, when I was first getting into this, when you were being hired as a Scrum Master or as a coach, you were often asked, "What is it that you're going to do?" It was help me understand what you're going to do to help me or this organization or this team in this context. And that's part of what you had to do is that conversation is going to get a sense of what the challenges are and kind of figure out how you're going to help. Whereas now, the number of jobs that I see and even a lot of the ones that I end up applying for, you end up getting it's almost flipped on its head. It's like they're saying, right, we already know what we want a Scrum Master or an Agile coach to do. So you're going to do these things and prove to us that you can do these things. And that would be okay if it weren't for the fact that they're almost always the completely wrong things.
Exactly.
It's like, yeah, tell us about how you're going to facilitate all the Scrum meetings. Tell us about how you're going to manage the burn down charts and make the team's velocity increase. And so kind of back to what I said earlier, it's like you've got a more uphill battle now of trying to get people to that point of understanding of what our actual value proposition is, because it's been kind of skewed, I think, by a lot of bad practice that's become just expected by people. So
Yeah. I think you reminded me of something that professional Scrum trainer Sam said. That the time he spoke to a particular developer about Scrum and Agile, and the guy said, "No, no, I'm done with that rubbish."
yeah,
We're like, "Why?" He said, "It's bad. It's terrible." So after the conversation, he realized what the guy said. He was like, "Yeah, you're correct. That's horrible, but that's not Agile. Actually,
yeah,
they put the Agile name there, but all that you just described isn't Agile at all." So he then
yeah.
said the work was then, how can I work with this guy without using because those words are burned in his memory now. So I have to do something else, which is what you said that was very powerful. You talk about pragmatism. Because a lot of people don't know that another word for the agile practice is pragmatism.
Yeah.
And let me just say this. A lot of people assume when we look at the frameworks, they the way I look at the frameworks, I look at the frameworks as people's expressions of their experiments, what they've done in the agile space to solve the issue of value creation, right? So you look at Scrum. Scrum is particular about some things. Kanban is particular about some things. XP is particular about some things. So none of them is saying this is the only way. What they are saying simply is, I found a way that seems to address what I'm particular about. And that's why I usually liken the Scrum Master to Bruce Lee. Bruce Lee has all these fighting techniques, but then he created, like what you do with dysfunction mapping, he created Jeet Kune Do.
Yeah.
And it's a mixture of the best of all these things based on what he understands. And it's like, yeah, this is what works.
So it's interesting that you mentioned that because I sometimes wonder if I was primed to appreciate or enjoy the kind of the agile mindset, because when I was much younger, sort of late teen years, I got into parkour, which for anyone who doesn't know is like a movement art that's about efficiently moving from place to place, so climbing, jumping, all that kind of thing.
Oh, is it like base jumping or something like that?
Sort of. It's the basic premise of that sort of movement art, let's call it, is I want to get from A to B. What's the quickest and most efficient way I can get there? And then I'm going to learn the techniques and moves to climb and jump and vault and all this to get to where I need to be. It's been a long time since I've done it. I would kill myself if I tried it now. I used to be very into it. And one of I think a lot of the thinking actually was influenced by Bruce Lee. And in fact, so one of the well-known practitioners of that would often quote "Be like water,"
Yes.
with the idea of, you can learn how to jump over a wall, you can learn how to do this vault or to do this kind of a climb up. But when you're actually trying to get from A to B, it's not about the particular moves. It's about how you use that knowledge to adapt to the particular situation that you're in, right? It's very, very agile in that very pure sense. And I think that's a mindset that you can kind of build in a lot of places outside of the world of work. And I think that primes you to approach work in a different way, right? Which is, if you've come from a discipline or a background of you just need to learn this thing and then do this thing, then you probably are going to really struggle with this different, agile thing. Whereas if you have actually had experience in, martial arts or things where adaptation in the moment is very, very important, then it just makes sense. And I think that doesn't come naturally to a lot of people. I think the world of work seems like a place where you should be able to just plan and decide and then do. And it actually is quite counterproductive for a lot of people that this is actually something a bit different. So
Yeah, very true, very true. Isn't that what we say? The shuhari, learn the
yeah,
techniques, gather them, and then break them all. Create your own
yeah.
way, your own pathway through it.
It's funny because I know shuhari is a concept that's kind of fallen out of favor a little bit in the last couple of years. And I know my friend Phil Ledgerwood talks about this a lot, and he and I can disagree about this. But for me, it's both, right? I think the reason I still like the concept is like when I was doing parkour, it's like the very first thing that I would do if I was like practicing a precision jump, right? So jumping from a railing to another railing, I would take my lunch and go and spend 4 hours just practicing that one jump over and over and over and over again until it was absolute muscle memory. And then I would go and practice something a little bit more dynamic. I'm going to go from here to here and then use that skill that I've learned and adapt it in that context. That to me is that idea of going from shu to ha. And I think the way that it gets misunderstood in the Agile world is, well, you need to learn Scrum and then just practice Scrum by the book until it's second nature. And I don't know that that's necessarily true, but I think what you should do is practice it until you understand why it's set up the way it is. You should understand the rule of Scrum before you then try and do something different. And that's the part that I think we often skip over. And I see people breaking rules that they don't understand. Like the one I hear all the time is, well, we tried setting sprint goals, but it didn't really work for us. So now we just pull work as and when we need it. And the truth is, there are lots of teams that can work in that way because they've gotten to one piece flow, or they've got other ways of really focusing in on doing the right things, and that's fine. But for most teams who do that, it ends up just becoming chaos and noise, and they struggle to get things done. And so until you've understood why the sprint goal focuses you in on getting the right things done, you probably shouldn't be dropping that rule. I think that's what matters for me.
Yeah, very true, very true. In fact, I was thinking about something some time ago about, like Kanban has a maturity model. So I was thinking really about the Scrum team maturity model. And I was telling someone that, like what you just said, at the beginning, the rules are very important, but they're better to build a particular discipline.
Yeah.
Like I liken to a child. I told someone that when a child is young, you say, don't eat that. Don't put that in your mouth. Don't put that in your hand. Yeah. But at a certain age, you're like, if you put it in your mouth, it's your mouth, Obviously, the child will know not to. Like, I can't tell a teenager now, don't put a toy in your mouth. That's redundant. So that's how I was saying, person, that's how Scrum teams start. That's how teams start. At the beginning, getting to understand the fundamentals is very important because it creates discipline. It creates a space to learn. They learn the why, the what, the how. Then as a team matures, then they find out actually some of these practices can, like I always say in Tesla, they say, onboard a new practice, master the practice, delete the practice, and then move on.
Yeah.
So it stops being something that they have to headline. It becomes embedded.
Yeah.
And then they move on. So some of these practices for Scrum teams, the idea and Scrum Masters, if you're listening out there, the reason why we're saying stick with these practices is that they build the discipline, they build the muscle memory, like Mike rightly said. And once you've done that, then the team can look at the practice and say, okay, in our context, do we need to modify so we can work better? But not that you start in there and say, no, let's toss them because of our context. No, then there's no practice. There's no discipline to be had, so to speak.
Yeah, and I think so the use of the word discipline is a really important one there, because I think that's the failing, if I'm going to use a deliberately negative word. That's the failing that I see a lot in Scrum and Agile practitioners today, is the lack of discipline, which is to say we want to disguise it as pragmatism sometimes. I think to try to protect ourselves, we say, well, we can't really follow this rule. We can't really do this thing or use this practice because it wouldn't really work here. We're different. We're special. Or maybe it's just, I can't get buy-in to do this. And I think that speaks to the concept of discipline, right? Which is, well, if you do that sometimes, okay, maybe. But show me where you are practicing that discipline. Give me the examples of the places where we're, you individually and collectively as a team, we're saying, no, we have agreed we're going to do this thing and we're going to do it until we get good at it, until we've figured out, how to make this work for us.
Yeah.
Because if you're not doing that anywhere, then that's not pragmatism. That's just a lack of discipline. And being able to understand the difference between those two things is vital. Yeah.
That's very true. Thanks for that. So, Scrum Masters, you're hearing that. Like I said, Mike does know his stuff.
I
Okay,
try.
so Mike, let's look at dysfunction mapping. Now, like I said, I watched your YouTube videos. I'll put the link. Everybody listen, I'll put the link to his YouTube channel in the show notes, so you can actually look in there. Really, really nice videos there that you've put in together. Some of them, I saw one that are actually quite short and very precise, very straight to the point. So tell us about dysfunction mapping.
Yeah, so I think, like I alluded to at the beginning, it started just as a tool for me. It was me trying to get better at solving the problems for my teams, and I learned a bunch of things, mostly by doing things wrong, that I then kind of built into my process to protect me from doing things wrong over and over again. And at its highest level, dysfunction mapping is just stickies on a whiteboard, right? It's similar to something like, say, impact mapping or user story mapping. It's just a way of gathering your thoughts. But the more I've kind of iterated upon it and shared it with people, the more it's become a collaborative tool. It's become an approach to kind of find and solve problems together with people. And its main premise, the thing that it actually teaches you to do, is to use systems thinking to consider the totality of the problems that are around you, to then build a hypothesis that says, hey, I think that these problems that I can see over here might be related to this thing here. And here's an experiment that I can run that might solve the problem. And in particular, how I'm going to measure it so I can actually check. Firstly, was I correct? Did this have an impact? And then if you were correct, it gives you a way to demonstrate that value by saying, hey, here's what's improved and here's what's changed. So it's not intended to be like a silver bullet. It's not a cure-all, right? It relies on the creativity and the critical thinking of the person using it, but it gives you a lot of structure and boundaries to kind of keep things focused and to more quickly get to those experiments, which I found I have benefited from in the past. And certainly now, as I've taught it to other people, they seem to have benefited from it. So.
Okay, cool. I think when I watched the video, there's something that I love that you said, which is because a lot of people suffer from this, right? They go into a retrospective. Oh yeah, let's look at what went well, what didn't go well, and what can we do about it. They ignore the past retrospective. They ignore the impact of the past retrospective to know, should we continue what we decided to do earlier or should we pivot? But what I saw because in your video you put you put the map in there, and I could see that you could trace a symptom because what you said something about, a lot of times people address symptoms and not the actual root cause. So you can use this functional mapping to actually draw into the root cause and then actually see, did we get it? And then you said something, you also have measurements at the end. So it's very clear and open, and it's very, most importantly, objective.
Yeah.
So people can see, did we solve the problem? Has that symptom gone away, or has another symptom emerged to indicate that there's a deeper problem?
Yeah.
And I think I love that because we always say to Scrum Masters, or you do a retrospective, you take maybe 2 or 3 actions into the next sprint. But a lot of times people don't wrap it around to go, okay, we've done this. Let's measure if it actually worked. Did it make things better or even worse? So I like the fact that you addressed that.
Yeah, I appreciate that. It's interesting that almost every Scrum and Agile practitioner that I talk to has gone through that same set of patterns of going into retrospectives and, talk about a couple of things. And it's so common that it surprises me sometimes that no one else has kind of done this thing that I'm doing, which, to be fair, they have, right? It's just not been given a name and it's not been given a structure. I often talk to very experienced practitioners and I show them dysfunction mapping and they're like, oh, that's basically what I already do. I just never thought to structure it and give it a name. But I think the thing for me that really led to sharing it with the world is, and I say so it has 5 steps. As well as building a funnel, you start with symptoms, you connect those to dysfunctions, then you come up with a purpose statement so that you can come up with a solution, a thing that you're going to do, and then finally a measure that checks to see if it has the outcome.
Exactly. Yeah.
We can potentially talk about those in detail if it would help, but that's up to you. But sort of the reason that it starts with that symptom piece is my realization very early on that I have a tendency, and I think a lot of people have a tendency, to go straight into firefighting mode and say, right now, this is the thing that people are seeing and complaining about, so I'm going to jump on and try to solve that problem. But if that thing is being caused by something further afield, then as soon as you put that fire out, another one's going to burst up over here, right? And you can end up, and this has happened to me, right? You can end up spending an entire year and solve dozens and dozens of problems, but nothing's
symptoms,
actually
yeah.
any better because they're all just, fires popping up. And so what I'm teaching people to do, and this is part of the systems thinking element, is to say, right, how can I gather these symptoms, which are, importantly, these are the things that your team or your stakeholders report to you, right? These are the things that make their life difficult. This is anchored to what they need. And then you pulling those together and looking for patterns and saying, actually, these 5 or 6 things feel like they could be related, right? Maybe the team is complaining that they feel overworked all the time. Managers are complaining that we never get anything finished. The product owner is complaining that we constantly roll work from sprint to sprint. And me using my expertise can say, these all feel related. And then I can identify a potential root cause, although recently I've started trying to avoid using the term root cause because I don't want to mislead people into thinking it's like a single, this is the root cause. It's, there are many ways you could tie things together. But the idea then is I could say, well, for example, hey, this team doesn't set a sprint goal, so that harms their focus. And I could hypothesize that maybe if we solved that problem and improved the team's focus, maybe all of those symptoms would be affected at once. And so now I can come up with an experiment, a way of helping the team improve their focus, measure to see if those symptoms start to go away. And now I've got a little loop that I can run and see what happens. And then either it has an impact and I can move on to this sort of stage 2 and try and make it a bit better again, or nothing changes and I now have a bit of information that tells me I need to re-examine this system and kind of have another go. And that's kind of the pattern I'm trying to get people into, is just do this over and over again as an ongoing thing and just look for those 1% improvements, but that are tied to the underlying causes, not just the symptoms.
And this is just a segue. This is for you people that think Scrum Masters do nothing other than the events. You can see that there's a lot that goes in, because truly people need to get this, that as a Scrum Master, we are expecting adapting process and product.
Yeah.
So even how your team currently works, an experiment. And what Mike is saying now is that if you are able to actually assess the experiment properly, it is, I won't say easier, but it's more pragmatic to actually, because you can actually run conscious, proper experiments to go, this symptom, we're seeing this issue, let's try this and see if we can sort this problem out. Right. And like Mike rightly said, it's a systemic view. We're not just, because the team exists not in a vacuum, right? It feeds and it's fed. So you look at, and like, I think, was it Klaus Lippo that said something? I can't remember who said it particularly, but it said something about where you see the problem, the actual source is really a step above and might be in different directions. So you might look at your team and go, oh, my team isn't delivering because. If you use dysfunction mapping, you actually be able to dig deeper. It's a well put together framework that allows you to dig deeper with your team.
Yeah.
And then say, okay, the thing I love about it is the consciousness of the experimentation. That's a really powerful part. Because one thing about it, that if you're able to bring it to a team and we decide on an experiment, we own the results together. We own the experiment together. It's no longer, Charlton Heston driving the horse whip and then trying to get the team to move forward. It's, we agree, we've looked at the problem, we've seen the symptom, and we've itemized a certain group of issues as the root causes. And then we say, okay, let's experiment this solution to see if it's solved. And then as a team, we also determine, how do we know it's working? And that's a really powerful question. How do we know as a team that it's working? And the team says, okay, this is how we think it is. And then we measure. Just a quick question before we go on. Do you offer any trainings for this dysfunction mapping?
I do, yeah. So I've got a full day workshop that I run. So that's like 8 hours, either one day or 2 half days. And that's kind of liberating structures, build teams, and actually go through the process of building a dysfunction map together.
That's fantastic.
So yeah, I actually, so people who come to that become what I call dysfunction mapping practitioners, and they get a little badge. And I'm up to like nearly 300 people now that have been to that training. So it's proved to be like super, I guess, in demand. Like, the thing that I've realized is one of the things that pushed me to do this is as soon as I started offering this training, it was like people were clamoring for it, because it was like, oh, this isn't just another, here's a framework, follow a framework. It's actual tools that I can really use in my day-to-day to do my job and to prove my value to the people around me, right? Which I think people really, really have been waiting for more stuff like that, because as an industry, we maybe have left a gap there.
Yeah, true. So for our listeners, in the show notes, the link to register for the course will be there. And there's something that I love that you're doing, Mike, So let me just finish that statement. The link will be in the show notes. So register for the course. Is like Mike said, is either a full day course or 2 half days. But register because you see, I did a podcast once and I likened the Scrum Master to Batman. And what I said was, Batman has his tool belt. As a Scrum Master, you have to have a tool belt. You can't go in only, waving the flag of, oh, I know how to run events and I know Scrum, according to the Scrum guide, really well. Not every problem will be solved by that single flag. The more tools you have and know how to use, the better.
Yeah.
And like Mike said, at least for me, I think we had the same experience. We talked about this earlier. When I went through my imposter syndrome phase, the way I fought it off was to learn. It made me voracious to learn because I'm like, you go into a place and the problem is presented to you. You are thinking, like what they say, if all you know is how to use a hammer, everything is like a nail.
Right.
But if you learn these techniques, it's better. So you're about to something.
Yeah, no, so I agree with everything you just said. And I think the way that I often see that play out, and it's part of what I'm trying to kind of push back against, is when people learn a particular agile framework, say Scrum or Kanban, both tools that I believe are really, really useful and valuable and that we should know. But then if that's all you know, or in particular, all you know is the theory of that approach and not how to actually use it to make things better for people, then your only way of being successful is to implement that framework to make your teams behave in a way that aligns with that theory, which is where that very command and control-y Scrum Master or Agile coach can come in. Whereas if you've got some tools that allow you to experiment and bring these practices in to solve particular problems, well, then you can actually really add the value. And this is part of what dysfunction mapping does, because I use Scrum in my examples a lot because it's kind of the most common agile framework, let's say. But the dysfunction mapping is completely agnostic, right? It's when we're pulling in our practices or our experiments, we can pull from anywhere. And like I've even joked that if you're a waterfall project manager and you've got a bunch of knowledge about SDLC, you could use dysfunction mapping to improve your waterfall project by pulling in SDLC practices. Yeah. I'm not going to use dysfunction mapping that way, but you could, because that's the idea, right? It's up to us to figure out in our context what are the practices that we think will help us. And I'm not going to make judgments of what's right or wrong in your context. I can only tell you about my experience.
Yeah, true. Yeah. That's really good. Yeah, you can hear that. And that's one thing that, we talked about earlier about, the context. The context, I always say in my classes, context is king. It's not the framework that that is king, it's the context. Because, you may have the best knowledge of this particular framework, and the context that you're in, that framework can't work. What do you do?
Right.
So my solution to you is simply this: attend the dysfunction mapping class. Because like Mike rightly said, it's agnostic, and that's really powerful. Because, you have to think of it this way. There's Agile, there's the umbrella, right? And they actually, if you look at all of them, there are practices that are common, similar to all. So when you have an agnostic tool, it's really good. So thanks for contributing to the space, because I think you and I, we share that passion in improving, and that's what, you remember the Agile Manifesto. We are continuing to discover new ways.
Yeah, we are covering better ways of working.
Yeah. And that's why I always tell people that people don't realize that the Agile movement hasn't stopped. It's still moving and evolving. I said that to someone once, and the person said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Okay, let me show you one typical example. The Scrum Guide. What's written beside it? 2020. That means it was a previous version. That means it's evolved, right?
Yeah.
That's proof enough for you."
It's interesting because you say that, and it's true for sure. But I think one of the things that has led me to focusing so heavily on dysfunction mapping and the work I currently do is I had this realization because someone was coming to me and was like, I'm a new Scrum Master. What are the things that I should learn? What are the tools that I should have in my tool belt? And I realized that all of the things that I'm telling people today are basically the same things I was telling them 10 years ago. Right, it's impact mapping, it's dysfunction mapping. It's user story mapping, value stream mapping. You can tell I like mapping things.
I was about to say something about that.
Yeah, but it's even it's like test driven development or behavior driven development. If you want to go down those routes, but I find that there's very little that has come along in the last 10 years that feels like it has added an actual new and interesting way to solve some of these problems. And there's stuff that's become more popular, and there are a few things that have kind of reframed things. And to be fair, that's all dysfunction mapping really is a reframing. I don't think there's much in that's necessarily new, but the technique is new at least, and maybe gives people something a bit more valuable. But I think that's where, and again, I don't want to annoy people too much by getting into my rants about the industry, but one of the things that I talk about somewhat often is that we've kind of created this self-fulfilling prophecy in the Agile world, because all of our best and brightest practitioners, right, the people who have become really, really good at what they do, almost always their kind of next career step is to become an Agile trainer, to like teach Scrum or to teach Kanban. And again, I don't think those are bad things. I think we need those people. We need people doing that stuff.
Yeah.
But because it's had such a high demand for that kind of training for so long, all of our best and brightest are spending all of their time thinking about how do we better teach people entry-level Scrum or entry-level Kanban, and they're not thinking what are the new tools that we could create, the new approaches and techniques that might help people solve problems. And so we've ended up directing everyone to focus on solving a very particular and small subset of the problems that we should be thinking about. And that's why I'm trying to shake people awake in a way, which is to say, like, we don't need any more people doing PSM1 training or, entry-level Kanban training. Again, I do not want to criticize anyone that's currently doing that, but hey, let's maybe stop creating more of those trainers. Let's maybe stop creating more of those entry-level practitioners. Exactly. And look up instead of looking down, which I think is where we really could benefit as an industry.
Nice. It's so true, because you think of it, part of the, like you said, part of the problem we are facing is just that. Like I was talking with one of my friends, and we're saying, so I'll give an example. A senior executive, are they thinking, we need to improve our agile practice so we can deliver better value? We need to get to the point, and like you said, the foremost guys need to be in those spaces, coaching the C-suite to go, your complex space, this is what will work for you, or at least consider this, as opposed to they bring in, like I worked in a place where they brought in some consultants, and when I heard what they were saying, I was like, these guys don't know anything about Agile, but they have an Agile umbrella on whatever they put, and the C-suite don't know any better, so they go, go ahead. So part of their Agile implementation, I use the word implementation in inverted commas, was to get rid of Scrum Masters and to say, we focus only on product owners. And you think, that already is a failure, right? But they have a big name, so it's believable.
And to your point, right, it's that people don't know better, essentially, and how could they know better when we're not doing a very good job of teaching people? And again, I say we because it's people like me, the coaches, the trainers, that I think need to do a better job of this. But again, I'm going to go into a rabbit hole that's going to potentially rub people the wrong way. But I talk about safe. I talk about safe somewhat frequently because not because I'm a massive fan of safe. I don't think it's the right answer in most of the places that it's being used. But I do think it serves a particular purpose and it solves a particular problem that most of the Agile community is just willfully ignoring. Which is,
I agree with you.
Giant complex organizations, how do they get from waterfall to something a bit more agile? And I think safe is a really good stepping stone for a lot of those really big complex organizations. And to your point, the thing that frustrates me is I often see agile practitioners, very experienced and very knowledgeable agile practitioners, saying, well, safe is just stupid and wrong and no one should use it. And then you say, okay, so what should people do? And then they'll just throw out these platitudes like, oh, they should just descale. So, brilliant. Yeah, that's going to help a $1 billion organization that's trying to figure out what its roadmap for the next year looks like.
So what's the solution? Break it down, and that's the end.
And again, it's not that that's wrong. It's not that I disagree with the concept of descaling, but it comes back to my point about we need to give people real guidance. It's like SAFe gives people concrete guidance.
Yeah,
a lot of that guidance is sketchy, to say the least. But there's also some good stuff in there. I want to make that clear. But the point is, if you're presented with two options, and one of them is, here's a structure that's been tested, that's got some stuff in it that you can read and you can understand and you can practice. And over here, there's famous Agile coach on LinkedIn saying, just trust me, bro. Which one are you going to go for, right? And I think that's what, so we need to get better at saying, right, it's not cookie cutter. I can't just say do this and you'll be successful. But what I should be able to do is say, here's the structure that I would use to kind of figure out what's going on and run some experiments, and this is what that would look like. That's what I'm trying to do with dysfunction mapping to a degree, right? But I think we all need to be doing that. I don't want to be the only person in the world that's giving people a mechanism to do that, because as an, the industry will thrive based on the competition of these ideas. And until people, we need competition in terms of like the scaling framework. So we need stuff to challenge safe. And there are people that are, talking about that stuff and doing that, which is great. But we also need competition in the, well, here's how you do it without a framework. Here's how you experiment to incremental improvement. And that's where we need more people, I think, sharing their approaches. So.
Yeah, very true, very true. Thanks for that. Thanks for contributing. Thanks for adding to it. So I have one question that many people scratch their heads. And the question is, okay, I have two questions, but let me start with the first one. The first question is, if you had to go back 10 years, 15 years in the past, and you met Michael, and Michael didn't know he was looking at Michael, like Back in the Future, Marty McFly and the rest, what would you tell yourself?
So there's two things that kind of spring to mind. So the first one is maybe the obvious one that I think I would tell to any Scrum Master or a coach who's just getting started, which is you don't know as much as you think you do. Just because you went to a course, right? Just because you got your PSM or CSM, whatever it is, you do not have a clue how complex product development works. And even in 10 years' time, you're only going to really have a limited understanding of it. And so stop trying to make things look like the textbooks and start thinking in experiments. Start thinking about how to make a small change that makes things a little bit better. And I think that if I'd have learned that on day one instead of year 3, I probably would have, had more success sooner. I think the second one, though, and this is almost counter to that in a way, is I would reassure myself and say, you're not crazy. Like it is as stupid as you think it is. And part of this may be my autistic brain. I don't know if it's just me or if it's everyone, but I do find that I regularly, like, I'm in an organization or in a team and I'm hearing a conversation, I'm seeing something, and I'm just like, what on earth is going on here? How does no one see how stupid this is? Like we're doing stuff that is just obviously nonsense. And I think I would need to be careful about how I framed this to my younger self so I don't mislead me. But you have to acknowledge that actually you are seeing something that is there and it does need to be solved. But that doesn't mean that you should just be a fire starter and go in and try and say, hey, let's break this or change it. But what you should do is figure out a way to connect the dots for people and help them realize that what we're doing is a bit silly and see if we can maybe come up with something better. Because I think I kind of spent my first few years just bouncing between these two mistaken ideas, which was one, either, oh, if you just do what I'm doing and follow the Scrum guide and do this, then everything will be fine, which is wrong. But then I also spent a lot of time second guessing myself and saying, well, this over here seems stupid. And that stuff could be coming from Agile practitioners as well. And I would think this seems stupid, but I'm not going to say anything because, I don't have a textbook to back me up. So I'm going to just be quiet. And I think, being willing to call out what's broken, but then being open to, how to experiment to make things better. That kind of is the sweet spot for me.
Oh, fantastic. That's really good. Really nice. Yeah. Lots to think about there.
Yeah.
Okay, so
you can tell my brain goes a bit quick. Sorry.
Yeah, it does actually. The way you read it out. Okay. So final question. Now this one is a head scratcher.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Yeah, go for it.
So what question should I have asked you?
Oh God, that is a good question. So I think the question that we don't ask enough in the community right now, which I think therefore is a question you maybe should ask, is what do we do to hold a higher standard for our practitioner community? Like, what is it? I guess going back to something I said at the beginning about how it feels like maybe we're on a bit of a downward trend and things are getting worse. It's like, okay, how do we stop that, or how do we raise the bar? I think that's a question that feels important to me. I certainly don't know that I have an answer for it, but it's a question that feels worth exploring.
Okay. I was going to ask what answers do you have for that question?
So
What would you
very much
propose we'd sort it out? Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm very much thinking out loud here. So these will be imperfect, but I think we have to stop allowing people to devalue what agile practitioners do. So you know, we just run meetings, we just come up with fun retro activities. You know, this stuff. Again, not that those are not useful skills. They are important things that we should think about. But if that's all that we think about or talk about, then we have failed miserably. And I think, at risk of sounding like a bit of an asshole, I do think we just need to call it out sometimes. I think the problem is a lot of us, we sit there and we see this and we're like, that we should be doing more than that, but we don't want to be seen to be being mean, and so we don't call it out. And I think maybe that's a bar we could raise. I think the other thing is expecting and talking about Scrum Master's ability to demonstrate what they've actually done in terms of the value that they've added. So if we're going to talk about, you know, let's say job interviews or even just like the conversations we have on LinkedIn, how do you know that you're successful as a Scrum Master? How do you define your success as a Scrum Master? And I should be able to have that conversation quickly and with anyone who asks, and in any context, right? Like there's not a version of Scrum Mastery where you should not be expected to say, here are the problems that I've solved recently, here's how I measured that things got better, right? I think basically, back to what you said, I think earlier in the day, is like we need to get better at having the I forget the words you used. It wasn't quantitative. It was
the objective and subjective.
Objective and subjective. Sorry, there we go. That was the words you used. We need to get better at having objective conversations about not just what a Scrum Master is, but us individually as Scrum Masters and what we've achieved. So subjective is important. It's in there as well. But I think as a community, we've spent 80% of our time, if not 90, talking about the subjective stuff. And it should be at least 50-50, if not like 60-70 skewed towards the objective stuff. So we're a long way from where we need to be. And I think we, as a practitioner community, have to just hold that line and say, right, we expect this of our people.
What to think about now? Yeah, because that's a really powerful answer on the fly. Really powerful answer to the question. Yeah, because we're all in the midst of it right now, right? We're at the point where, and like I said in one of my podcast episodes, that as a Scrum Master, you have to go into, when you're an organization, you have to go in there and go, yeah, we can solve this. We should solve this. We should change that. Not just because I've fallen, I've done this as well, where in an organization I try to push beyond the boundary I was put in, which is just the team.
Right.
And when I got knocked down the first time, I mean, it's, you look at, you're a contractor, you get knocked down, you think, well, if you keep me here and I just help the team get better, I'm okay. But then you realize you're contributing to the redefinition of the role, which is local to the team.
Yeah.
So actually, looking back now, I should have actually pushed a bit more. And obviously, like I always tell people, the only way you push more is if you can demonstrate value where they currently placed you. So then when you say, let's go out the door, they are confident that, okay, yeah, because what you're doing is working. But like Mike rightly said, you need to objectively demonstrate that what you are doing is working. You have to show this is how things are improving, this is what I'm doing. So that when you then ask for the door to be opened, people are confident that, okay, you're going to replicate the same. But you can't, like you said earlier, you can't just say, trust me, bro.
It's got to be more than that. It's interesting because you remind me of a post I did recently and some good conversations that came of it, because one of the things I actually think, and this adds to the conversation we just had, one of the things that we do badly as a practitioner community is own our failures and talk openly about our failures. And what I mean by that is, well, if I'm an Agile coach or a Scrum Master and I'm brought into an organization to help this organization get better, and the organization does not get better in a measurable and in a way aligned with the things that I was trying to achieve, then I failed. and I should be able and willing to be open about that failure. And I think Agile coaches often use these cop-out statements around, well, I wasn't empowered or I wasn't supported by leadership. And it's like, that might be true, and that sucks. I've been in that situation where you can't be successful because you don't have the support, or you're not empowered in the right way, or any other number of things. But it's still failure. You still have to own and be honest about the fact that you failed. Yes, it wasn't just down to you, but it was a failure, and we have to talk about that. And I think I mentioned the LinkedIn post I did because it was something that it frustrated me a little bit at the time, because I talk about psychological safety a lot. One of the tips that I give people in terms of, getting away from just the fluff of psychological safety and into what do we actually do. My main thing that I recommend to leaders and managers and stuff is find ways to admit your failure, because by you doing that, you set the example for other people that it's okay to admit failure.
Yeah.
And so, as you can imagine, I try to live by that philosophy. And I did a post about my last full-time Agile coach job and how I felt like I failed. Yeah, I made some things a little bit better, but I did not, in the time that I was there, help the organization to actually get to incremental delivery. So I was there for 9 months, and they were delivering no more often when I left than when I started, which is to say 0. They did not deliver anything. And that was a failure on my part. Again, there were lots of reasons for that. There's lots of contributions to why that is. There are a lot of people in that organization that still said that I helped them in a number of ways, which I'm really, really grateful of. But I still failed to do the thing that I was hired to do. And I spoke openly about that. And I got a lot of comments from people saying, well, no, you didn't fail because X and Y and blah, blah, blah. And it annoys me because that's the mindset, and it's the cognitive
Like
dissonance.
Denial. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a thing that I feel really glaringly obvious in our community, which is we tell people that they should admit failure because we want psychological safety and that we want to make it safe to fail. But then we, the people that are doing this, will do everything we can to bend over backwards and not admit when we failed. And it's we have to be better at that, right? That is something vital to people taking us seriously. So I realized that was a very long and waffling answer.
No. Actually, it's very powerful because in the end, there's something you said. It's about, we tell people we have to practice the same. Because like when I train people, I say something that the Scrum Master is a mirror as well. It's what you're consistent, which is the attitude you present that your team will pick up. So I always tell them you have to be very, very conscious that every step you make is a mirrorable step. Every expression you give is something that they're going to mirror. Because as far as that team is concerned, you are the SI unit of Scrum. Everything you do is how Scrum does it. So if they can glaringly see that it isn't working, and they're going, yeah, it's working. Yeah, nah. That's a lie. They can see that it's not working. You get, and you can bring out some measures to go, okay, this part has worked. This part has worked. But the overall goal, which was, like you said, in your situation, the overall goal was to deliver quicker, or at least more frequently, and that didn't happen.
Something.
So you can say, I mean, it's like a football team, for example. You can have the best players there, they played the best game, but they lost. They can't say, it was the ball that didn't go into the net. No, they have to say, we tried, we hit the bar a couple of times, and the other team scored 3 goals, so we lost. It's just being open, and because what that then does to the teams, we can then say, how can we prevent this from happening the next time?
Exactly. Yeah,
I think a powerful point.
And that's exactly it for me. I think to put a bow on that whole concept is like, if you do not admit failure, you cannot learn from failure. So you can't have it both ways. You can't say that you want to learn from failure while also trying to avoid admitting that you failed. In fact, you should be seeking opportunities to talk about your failure and being maybe even going too far in the direction, maybe admitting failure more often than you should, because I'd rather have more learning opportunities and feel like a failure more often than feel like I'm doing a really good job and learn nothing. So
Dude, I'm laughing. What you said was funny, but then it triggered a memory. Do you remember, obviously I'm sure you know Jeff Bezos, right?
Yeah.
Amazon CEO. Do you remember the Fire Phone?
Yes. Yeah.
There was an interview that he had. A Packer reporter was interviewing him, and she felt very cheeky. She was like, okay, what about the Fire Phone? What happened there? What do you feel about the failure? And the guy said, the failure of the Fire Phone. He said, yeah, he failed. We learned a lot of stuff. He said, I'm going to fail at something tomorrow. I'm going to keep failing. It just takes one success. That we will keep trying. That there was no ill feeling. We failed at it. Yeah, we failed. But we learned a couple of things about ourselves, about the product. And I plan to fail at something tomorrow. That's what he said. He said, I plan to fail at something tomorrow because we learn. We learn from it.
Yeah.
And the lady she was like, okay, I lost my uppercut there.
No, but I think that's the right mindset, right? I think, and again, it is a balance. So what we don't want to do is start seeing failure as this negative thing that, we have to beat ourselves up over. But, if we try to do something and we don't achieve it, that's a failure. But then taking something from that, learning and doing something different next time, that turns it into a win. And that's the cycle that we want to be in, is you have to fail in order to win. And if you do that over and over again, you will end up in a vastly different place in a year's time than where you are today. So.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, so thank you. I think that was my last question. Yeah. So that was my last. Like I said 2 head scratching questions, didn't I?
Yeah, I appreciate that.
That was the plan. So thank you very much. It's been fantastic having you. Like I said to our listeners, I'll put in the show notes. You'll find Mike's LinkedIn link. If you have your email there, we'll put it there. The link to his course will be there, and we'll talk and we'll communicate. All of your links, I'll put them in the link in the show notes. You can get in touch with Mike. Like we talk about this function mapping training, it is powerful. I'm telling you. I'm actually even thinking about it. I just have to get my schedule, because the more, like I always tell Scrum Masters, the more tools you have and you understand how to use, the better you are for wherever you go, and the better you are in the organization, the more access you will get to actually help the organization become better. Not just the team, but the organization. Because if you use this, like if let's look at dysfunction marketing, for example. If you use it properly and you understand how to use it properly, you might actually be able to point to beyond the team where they need to solve the problem. And that's access. You can and the way it is with dysfunction mapping, you can actually show them, oh, you called me for this symptom. The cause is here. And we're going to experiment to do this. And this is how we're going to measure success. For any manager, you've answered all their questions in that singular statement. Because where is the problem? How will you know? What are you going to do about it? How will you know you've solved it? And how will I get to know? All that in that single statement. So, yeah.
Yeah, it's transparency, right? The power of transparency.
Full transparency, yeah. So thank you very much, Mike. It's been fantastic having you on. Thank you for heeding the call for this podcast. Thank you for coming on as quickly as you did. It's been fantastic. So to our listeners, Mike, any last word for them?
No, just thank you, Temi, for having me on. I really enjoyed the chat. To anyone that's listening, I would just encourage you, whether it's dysfunction mapping or another approach, think about how to better solve the problems that matter to people and prove that you have had an impact. If you do that, then you will be in the top 1% of Agile practitioners in the world.
Fantastic. Get to know about dysfunction mapping, okay?
Cheers, mate. Appreciate it.
Cheers, everyone. Wow. And that's a wrap. Thank you for joining today's conversation. We hope you gain new insights into the role of a Scrum Master, the importance of measurable value, and the need for continuous learning and improvement in the Agile space. Remember, it's not just about following rules, it's about understanding them well enough and adapting with discipline. Remember, the context will always be king. So if you enjoyed this episode, make sure to subscribe, share with your friends and loved ones and your colleagues, and even people you don't like, and leave us a review. We'd love to hear your thoughts. So stay tuned for more episodes as we continue to explore the evolving world of agility and help you elevate your practice. Thanks for listening, and we'll catch you next time. Have a wonderful day and keep doing great stuff in the Agile space. Thank you very much.